Hello, everybody, and welcome back to What Culture. We are here again to talk to you about horror stuff, which is me, Ash Millman, ye Kirsten Rhea. Say hello, Kirsten.
Hello.
And the Josh Brown. Say hello, Josh.
Hello, Josh. It'll never get old. It'll never ever get old.
It's the perfect joke. So if you've been keeping up with the channel recently, you've seen a lot more horror podcasts from us. So we are back again this week with more horror podcast stuff to deliver straight to your peepers. So I hope you're excited about that. This week, we're talking about the ever conversed about concept of the jump scare and how that has worked as a convention across horror over the years. And basically the good ones, the bad ones, the ugly ones. I think I say this about every topic that we talk about. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly of jump scares. All the things that we like that they've done over the years, all the things that they've kind of messed up with, and just basically how they've been implemented. So I feel like this is a really interesting point of horror because so many recent horror films rely on jump scares and creating fear through massive panic attack moments rather than building it up slowly. And there's been this whole school of horror that goes one way and a school of horror that goes the other. And it's just interesting to see how people feel about them. So I think I'm just going to open up straight away to you guys and ask you the question of, how do you feel about jump scares? What do you think that they do? Do you think that they're worth it? Do you think they're a great way of having modern horror? Loads of questions in one, but point blank, how do you feel about them?
Yeah, I love a jump scare. I feel to me that there's two types of jump scares. There's a sort of jump scare that you know is coming and it kind of slowly seeps in and you get all like tense and you're like, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I think that the best jump scares are the ones that literally like come out of nowhere, which is literally like the definition of a jump scare. I think is one that comes out of nowhere and it does catch you off guard. They are the best ones because even though sometimes you're anticipating it and you're kind of holding on, you do still jump, but it's not as good because you're kind of already like, oh, it's gonna happen. But the best ones are where it completely catches you off guard. And for me, I just always seem to have this completely like guttural, like sort of scream. It's like a really like, that really got me. And like that, I love that feeling of being like, oh, you bugger, you got me. And yeah, I love a good jump scare. I don't like it when they do kind of hint that it's gonna be there. I do like when they just kind of spring on you like, aha, bet you weren't expecting that. Yeah, I love a good jump scare.
Yeah,
it's good for the heart, good for the soul.
Oh, it makes you puts you in the moment, isn't it? It's quite grounded. I think there's the point of contention between the two is whether it grounds you in the horror and you go, oh my god, I'm really scared and invested, or if it takes you out because you're like, why did an orchestra just appear out of nowhere in this silent scene? I'm not quite sure. How do you feel about it, Josh?
I'm a big fan, when a lot of people, because a lot of people don't like jump scares at all, a lot of people think it ruins the horror, like you said, like it breaks the immersion, it breaks the flow of whatever story's being told. But I've always kind of defended them because I think when they're done well, like Kirsten said, they add so much to the overall viewing experience. You know what I mean? It makes it kind of a community thing. Like there's nothing better than being in a horror movie theater watching something play out and everyone's potentially anticipating a jump scare and then it happens, then you all react in the same way and you all have that sigh of relief. That said, I do think there's like a genuine art to it. You have to be really good at putting them together. You can't just misuse it or overuse it. I do think that's why it's got such a bad reputation because it's such a lazy technique when it's not thought about. Like a load of bad horror movies just throw a jump scare in, like you said, a big sting of the orchestra or someone tapping someone on the shoulder, and then they think that they've done enough to scare the audience, and that's not how it should be. You shouldn't have just jump scares like that are essentially meaningless. They're kind of like calorie-free, you know what I mean? There's nothing of substance to them. But that said, I do think they complement the slow build or, background scares or general creepy atmosphere of horror quite well. You know what I mean? Like if you balance the two things together, I think you get a nice, richly textured horror movie that works on a bunch of different levels. It works on that immediate, sensory fright fest level, and it works on that kind of more psychological, understated level when you are seeing details in the background or shadows kind of like move and stuff. So for the most part, I'm here for them, and I think there are a few directors that do them very well, but can concede and understand why a lot of people are put off by it because they have become kind of shorthand for lazy horror filmmaking.
Well, I was actually hoping one of you would say, I really hate them, and here's why, because I can make you argue about it. But no, I think that those are both really well-constructed thoughts about it, because jump scares are a good thing, and they're an integral part of horror, and they are a community experience, in my opinion at least. I know there's people out there that hate them, like you say, Josh. And I think that you can't really have a horror movie without the sense of horror, and the easiest way to do that is with jump scares. But when they're done well, oh boy, are they a little treat to have when they've been earned. Because you don't want too many. You don't want like 500 jump scares in one film. So you're going, ooh, the whole time. You just want the one or two that really get you and you think about afterwards. So I think on that note, it's probably best to kind of bring up our favorite jump scares and why we think they work so well. Because film has so many. We're going to look at the awful ones as well, but film has so many brilliant ones. I think it's worth kind of going from there and saying, okay, hey, here's how you do it right. Here's what I want to see from a jump scare, and celebrating those good moments. So, hey, what have you got to bring to the table, guys? What's your homework for this week?
Ash, I've done my homework, and I've instantly forgotten most of it, to be honest. I've forgotten what the monster's name is, but the jump scare that jumps to mind, funnily enough, when you asked me for like the best ones, was Insidious, from the first Insidious, when you've got the Darth Maul-looking fella that suddenly appears behind, it's Patrick Wilson? It's Patrick Wilson, isn't it? Have I got that wrong?
It goes behind him, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I remember I watched that right at about a year after it came out, when I was kind of getting a bit sick of horror. I was thinking, right, has horror got anything new up its sleeve? Can it still scare me in the way it used to when I was a bit younger? And then I remember watching that, not expecting it, and it absolutely scaring the pants off me so much that I was watching it on a laptop screen in the middle of a random day like today at my parents' house. And it scared me so much that I jumped. My mum asked me if I was all right, and I made her watch that scene in isolation. I hadn't even finished the film yet, but it was so effective that I was like, I've got to show this to my mum and ruin her day. But I just think that worked so well. It might have actually led to an oversaturation of it, because I remember that scene getting shared everywhere on kind of Facebook, or even in kind of like just its still form. It was all over the place because it was such a kind of scary image. It was so well built up in a kind of conventional filmmaking sense, because for the most part, that scene is just a regular, reverse shot setup, the thing that you've seen so many different times, not only in horror movies, but in movies in general. Then at the very end, it obviously subverts your expectations of what that scene is going to be by throwing that Darth Maul fella in there. And I love it so much. And for me, that's what I think about when I think of Insidious. I don't love Insidious as a series as much as I probably should on paper, but that moment in particular will stay with me for a long, long time.
Yeah. The first half of the first Insidious is, it's horror movie filmmaking at its absolute peak. The first half of Insidious, I think, is one of the best modern horror films ever. The second half, one of the worst. Like, I hate the second half of Insidious. The tiptoe through the tulips with the long manicured demon just does not do it for me. I like it as a concept, but it does kind of, what was built up as a really scary, really intense horror movie with these, my hands are doing the shake then, with these like jump scares in, then moves into like farcical horror. And I feel like the two just did not meld well together. But the jump scares they do originally, definitely I'd agree that they are very good.
Yeah, the first film, I for one absolutely love the Insidious series, but I think that's just because I'm kind of in love with Patrick Wilson. But yeah, the first one is absolutely brilliant. And can I just say, Josh, that scene, I think the reason that jump scare works so well is because at that point, the mum is telling the story about what happened to I think his name is Josh, isn't it? Was it Josh?
Yeah, I think it is. That's what made it even scarier, to be honest.
It hit home. She's talking about obviously what happened to Josh as a child, and so you're so sort of hooked by that story. You're really sort of like engaging. You're sat there like, wow, this is really scary. And at that point, she's not even looking at Patrick Wilson. And I think that's why it works so well, is because you're so sucked into her story that when this red-faced demon pops up, you're just like, whoa, okay, hang on, I was trying to listen to the story. You interrupted the story. That jump scare in Insidious is just, it's chef's kiss perfection.
I think you're absolutely spot on. Like, part of it is you're invested in the dialogue that's happening, and I think that's incredibly important, to be invested in the scene. What you said there actually reminds me of the scene in Mulholland Drive where
I was waiting for this to come up. I was so surprised it wasn't on the sheet when you sent it over. I was like, oh.
Dude, I completely forgot. It's a total oversight, and I'm so pleased Kirsten's mentioned that so I can cram it in right now. But yeah, it's sort of similar to that scene where you have this kind of detective talking about this nightmare he's had. He's on about being in this diner with the person opposite him, and that he goes outside and he sees this terrifying thing and he feels like he's going to die. So you've got this setup scene where it's just a conversation and he's talking about this foreboding thing, essentially telling you everything that's going to happen and play out. But because the dialogue itself is already so unnerving and so scary, it makes the payoff, like, it doesn't ruin the payoff, because you're already invested in the fear this man is feeling, that when you see it for yourself, you feel his fear as well as yours. So when you get that jump scare payoff towards the end, when you do see the dumpster monster come around, like that's another one of my favorite ever jump scares, because it's so expertly done. And I think what a lot of these scenes have in common is how they play with the audience's expectation. You know what I mean? When you go to a horror movie, you expect jump scares, you expect to be frightened, and it's how the directors and how the writers and how the actors play on those expectations to subvert your expectations or match them, that I think ultimately is what makes it so frightening, rather than just a loud noise or whatever.
Yeah. I think expectations is definitely the key point of jump scares. And you get loads that either play with them as in, because it's become such an established trope, and deliver them and go, okay, we're going to extend this for this that tiny bit too long, so you don't know when it's going to come, but you do know that it's coming and it still really gets you, or absolutely come out of nowhere. Like one for me that absolutely stands out that got me incredibly hard and has stayed with me for years since was Signs, which I spoke about before. I spoke about Signs as a horror movie that scarred me so many times. And the jump scare where you know you're going to see an alien, because they're going, oh, we're going to look at this this party scene from this like found footage clip. You know you're going to see an alien, and you know all the kids are pointing at an alien, and you know you're looking at the window where an alien's going to walk past. And even when you watch it again, you know the alien's going to appear. But every time it comes out and looks dead down the camera, I'm like, ah! Like every time it makes me jump, it always gets me. And I think that is the peak of jump scares for me. Signs is a great horror movie. I hate when people say it's not a good horror movie to begin with, because it's a good horror movie and it plays with its conventions well. And I think that is one of the key moments where it's like, hey, these are horror movie conventions that you know are going to happen, that you know are scary, that you have all the information to know that you should be able to deal with this and write it off as nonsense or whatever, but it still hits home. And I think that's the best and most exciting horror for me, even when it's wrapped up in a movie that maybe isn't like peak production value or does everything right. I think having those jump scare moments that absolutely go, oh, hey, were you expecting this? Hell no, dab. Oh no. Sorry, that popped out. But yeah, I think that's a really good way of doing it. But yeah, Signs would absolutely be one for me. I think Insidious is a great shout. Kirsten, what's one of your favourites?
So one of my favourites, I'm going to go with my scarier one first, was Sinister, which was probably one of the only films that I've watched like recently. I say recently, it was a good few years ago. But you know, it's the sort of horror film that you watch and afterwards you're like, can I sleep in your room? Like it's one of those ones that like he just looked, the monster, I think it's Bagul, is that his name? Yeah. He just looks so terrifying. I hated how he looked, and it was such a good horror film that afterwards I generally did feel scared. And it's been a long time since I watched a horror film like that. But it's the scene with the lawnmower that just got me completely, because you know Ethan Hawke is watching these movies, and each time he watches the movie, obviously it's showing people being killed off, and up until that point I think you've seen like some pretty tame ones. Obviously these people don't die in good ways anyway, but you're seeing this video of like a lawnmower just kind of going across the grass at quite some speed, but you can't really see much of what's going on around it. It's kind of just like this single sort of light shining on just the lawnmower. So you're watching it and it doesn't cut away at all. It's just this whole scene, like a good like minute of just this lawnmower going, and you're like, right, okay, don't really understand what's going on here. Where's it going to with this lawnmower? And then out of friggin' nowhere, there's just this big like loud sound, and then there's just this body laying on the grass, and the lawnmower goes over this person. Oh, honestly, I'm pretty sure I had the exact same reaction as Ethan Hawke. I was like a proper like, like, oh, and then yeah, his reaction to it as well is just brilliant, because it's just you completely sympathize with Ethan Hawke, and it's just like, yeah, buddy, I'm with you. Like, oh, I didn't expect that coming. Like, oh, honestly, and yeah, just and that was just like the tip of the iceberg for me. I was just like, oh, I'm enjoying this movie, but I'm also really not enjoying this movie. Yeah, that's another example I think of a jump scare done well. Is like you said, kind of sucking you in and being like, you know, something's gonna happen, but you don't know when and you don't know what, and so you're and having that spotlight as well just kind of draw you in, and so you're like really focusing and you're just staring at that one spot. It's like that I don't know if you ever saw that bloody viral video that was going around when that zombie jumped out, and it's making you, it's like, watch the car, watch the car, watch the car, and then it's just bam, zombie in your face. And that's what I think is so good about that lawnmower scene. It's like, watch the lawnmower, and then it's just, oh, there's a face exploding, and it's just it really, really got me. And Oh yeah, I definitely slept in my brother's room that night. I was like, please let me sleep in your room. I'm scared.
I think bringing up these scare mazes is a really great point, actually, because I think it kind of shows how jump scares were a cultural phenomenon at one point, and like in like recent years and contemporary times with horror and everything, jump scares were a focal point of horror movies in general, to the point where you could distill them into tiny little clips and go, "Ooh, not expecting a scare, are you?" And I think that's probably what made people so tired of them, maybe in later years.
Yeah.
But what I also think is interesting to note, just to kind of jump into the history of jump scares a bit, is that they didn't always originate with sound. Like, sound's obviously an integral part of jump scares now and has been across the years. But the very first one, you don't actually need sound for it to play out, which is the Phantom of the Opera from 1925. There's a bit where the Phantom is revealed, or they go in and take the mask off, and he's like, "Ah!" and got a very spooky face looking at the camera, which like is the jump scare because it's the reveal sort of thing. And obviously when I have like sounds and orchestral music and things in silent cinemas to make those scenes stand out, that would play along with it. But just the scene on its own is scary enough that you don't need any of the sound. And then that has got like solidified over the years and intensified and made into the thing that jump scares have to have. I don't... Oh, sorry, Josh.
Oh, sorry. No, finish your point. I was going to just rudely butt in.
No, butt in all the way. I was just going to say that I think that the transformation into sound and the reliance on sound is something that kind of differentiates the really, really good ones that use it well and properly. I think Sinister is great because it uses sound in a creepy way all the way through and then hones in on it for its jump scares. And then the cheap ones that use sound as like, oh, here it comes out of nowhere. But yeah, just some thoughts.
No, I think that's entirely like spot on, because I think a lot of the worst movies that misuse jump scare just think it is the sound and startling you that's the most important part. You know what I mean? You might have the toast popping up out of a toaster and you'll get a big, or you'll have someone touching someone on the shoulder and you'll have a big orchestral sting. And it's kind of missing the whole point. Like the Phantom of the Opera one is obviously like a great shout, and there are a bunch like that where you look at them and you think this doesn't need anything else because the imagery itself is so scary and so shocking. Like the chest burster scene in Alien, which I guess isn't a jump scare in the conventional sense, but that plays out to just like the shrieks of everyone going, like everyone in the cast and everyone like kind of freaking out and wondering what's going on. And then you get like, you know, the sound design of the alien bursting through the chest and the chest breaking and stuff. There's no big sting when the chest, like when the alien bursts out the chest, you know what I mean? There's no big kind of like musical piece or whatever that accompanies the whole scene. And I think that's something that it goes back to the idea that jump scares are just kind of lazily implemented. It's like, what do we need to have one? We need to draw the audience's attention. We need to pay it off with a big sound, but we don't really know why it's supposed to be scary. And I think I've been watching a lot of bad horror movies while we've been having nothing else to do. I've been watching a bad Netflix horror movie every single Wednesday, and the thing that they all have in common is that idea of they don't know why a jump is scary. They just know they need a jump because it's been 3 or 4 minutes since we last had one. So we'll throw in a character sneaking up on someone, which everyone in these films do. We'll have, like I said, the toast popping. We'll have the doorbell ringing or something. And it's just, it lacks substance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not scary because a sound has happened. It's not scary because we weren't expecting the volume to change. It's scary because of the context or the characters or what we're seeing, or, you know, a creature's horrible face or something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's why Insidious 2 just wasn't as good as the first one, is because it just relied so heavily jump for the reason that, like, purely for the reason that you want to make me jump. It's not actually scary. And yeah, it does make you jump, which I guess is the whole point of a jump scare, but you still have to have that fear factor there. There's no point in just being like, oh, well, okay, you made me jump, congratulations, but I'm not scared though. Like, there's a difference, you know what I mean? A good jump scare is one that does make you jump, but then you are also like, oh my God, that was terrifying. Not just you got me, well done.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, you mentioned a few points ago about like how you watched those jump scares, and every single time you watch the movie, they still get you. And I think that's what separates a good jump scare from a bad one. The fact that you can revisit it. It's the fact that the build-up is so well-paced and the payoff is so good that it doesn't matter if the surprise isn't there anymore. You know, we were talking about the lawnmower scene, and I'd actually heard about that before I watched Sinister. I know it got like a load of buzz on Twitter or whatever, and people were talking about the lawnmower scene. So when that showed up in the final film, obviously I was expecting something. I had huge expectations for that to be something scary, and it still was, because the way it was constructed and the setup was so good. And I do think that's like the big differentiation between one that's done well, one that purely trades on surprise and shock, and one that's actually well crafted and genuinely scary.
Yeah, definitely. I ask you now, as another little return to what made jump scares what they are, what you think the most common jump scare is, probably in cinema history, and what was this is like the inception point, I would say, of the modern jump scare. But what do you think is the one that you see the most? Because there's lots of ones that are repeated throughout, but there's one, oh boy, there's one that stands the test of multiple appearances in films.
So one that I absolutely hate, and it's got to be at the top of this list, is the bloody closing of the mirror scene in the bathroom. I absolutely hate that jump scare because it's so obvious. And I think I can't remember what film I watched, but it was a horror film, and they twisted it on its head where it was like, oh, you're going to get a mirror jump scare. And then they just didn't do it. And then the jump scare came later on. And that is just perfect. But I absolutely hate the bloody mirror ones where it's like the mirror's slightly open and you can see the person like doing something, and then they're like and then they close the mirror, and then like someone's behind them, or a ghost is behind them, or just something scary, and then it's just like and then they turn around and it's not there, and it's so overdone, and I absolutely hate it. It's not scary anymore, and if you are going to do it, then do it in a way that's different, because I hate it. It's just so obvious. I just sit there like, oh, well, okay, they're going to shut the mirror, someone's going to be behind them. Oh, look, there's a ghost. It's just, yeah, it just doesn't work anymore. It's been so overdone that it's just not scary. It's just not, it doesn't even make you jump anymore, I don't think.
A very big shout. That I think that from my research came up with Repulsion. It's probably the first time that it actually happened and was used and then kind of mimicked from there, which was in 1965. But there is another one, which is top of my list. Josh, do you have a guess?
Is it a hand coming out of a ground, a wall, hands?
No.
I don't know.
No hands.
Is it a door closing? A door closing?
No, it's not. It's nothing. No hands, no doors. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to put you out of your misery, guys, because also good shout. But the one that you will notice in every film that you watch from now on, and you'll think, oh yeah, I've seen that 500 times before, is the cat jump scare, where you think think everything's fine, think everything's going well, and the cat comes out of nowhere and goes, "Rear!" and everyone goes, oh my god, I got spooked by the cat. And I think that's another version of the jump scare that kind of needs looking at, because the fake out jump scare and the one which says, oh, something scary is coming, but you don't know what it is, and maybe it might just be a cat, maybe it isn't actually anything at all, is an important part of building actual success with jump scares. If every jump scare is terrifying, then it loses its effect. Whereas if you have some that are like, oh, it's just the toaster, it's just the cat, then they work a lot better. And this kind of originated with the Luton bus trope in Cat People from 1942, where two women are walking down the road. One disappears in the darkness, and the other one carries on thinking she's been stalked. And as she gets to the bus stop, she looks around thinking she's going to get devoured by a werecat, and a bus halts, brakes as hard as it can next to her, and makes the noise of like what you'd imagine a panther's growl and a hiss to sound like. And you're like, oh my God, I thought she was going to get eaten by a cat. But actually, she's just getting on a bus. And I think it's a beautiful, chef's kiss piece of cinema that has kind of been integrated through so many films since. If you want a checklist of some of them, there is Friday the 13th Part 2 and 7. They really like that one. There's a Slumber Party Massacre. There is one in Alien. There's the Amityville Horror. There's Pet Sematary. There's Halloween 2, Demon Night, Darkness Falls, Hocus Pocus. Oh, take your pick. There's cat jump scares all over the place. And that is kind of the first inception of the jump scare as we truly know it in the Luton bus, named after Val Luton, who was the producer of the film. But there's plenty of other ones that crop up all over the place. Like you say with the mirror shot. The mirror shot is ridiculous and carries on so many times. But yeah, we spoke about ones that we really like and ones that are effective and kind of where they've come from. What do you think are examples of really bad ones? Is there any that come to your mind? I know we spoke about maybe it being cheap with sound or anything. Are there any that you think kind of exemplify the ultimate bad jump scare? Because I think for me, it'd be the Unfriended one.
Oh, which is the Unfriended one, actually?
Yeah.
The very end one, where the whole film is beautiful, great internet horror and found footage, and at the very end, she shuts the laptop and a spooky face is there. I was like, oh.
Dude,
oh yeah.
Fully agree. There was an epidemic of movies, right? During the 2010s, the early part of the 2010s, that felt like they needed to have that end credit stinger or end scene stinger where you would think everything was all right, and then you get a face in the up close and personal in the camera. And those are the worst for me. You've actually jogged a memory there. For as much as I love Sinister, I think it drops the ball right at the very end where you have that.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, you have that spooky shot.
They do the exact same thing in Sinister, which I would completely agree with you if he didn't look so scary. If it was just a typical like boo sort of thing, I'd be like, oh right, okay, well done. But he just looks so terrifying. I was like, oh, perfect. That's going to be etched in my mind for the rest of the evening. Thank you very much. But yeah. When you were saying about that was the first thing that came up. I was like, oh yeah, Sinister does that. Oh, you cheeky bugger. That's really not really naughty. They were doing so well.
Yeah, no, I think it's nice that they try. It's nice that they try and do it, but also it's terrible that they try and do it the easiest way possible, because they could have left them either out or done them differently and got a whole lot of praise for it. But yeah, Unfriended one hurts me the most, because I really like Unfriended as a movie. I think it's a great concept. I think it was really original. And then it drops this ending jump scare that's so unnecessary. Same with Sinister. Love that film. And it's just not needed. It's just not needed.
That's it. It's funny that both of those movies kind of, they almost drop their gimmicks or drop their believability for that final jump. You know what I mean? Like Unfriended drops its entire framing to give you that. And Sinister as well, kind of, for me, the ending has always felt a little bit incongruous with what came before, because Bagul is this spooky guy who's kind of in the background and stuff. And then he just pokes his head in at the very end. You're like, hey man, how are you doing? This is very nice.
Yeah,
and I think that was a real problem for me, because it was so expected. But then The Conjuring, I think it was the first one, upended that so well, where you're expecting this final post-credit or final scene kind of jump, and the camera's moving in towards this like music, this spiraling music box, and you expect something to happen at the end, obviously, because that's what we're being primed to anticipate.
In the mirror, of course.
Yeah,
of course. And then nothing happens though.
Yeah.
Then it cuts to black. And I remember being in the cinema watching that with my girlfriend. We were both like curling up because it just kept going on. And I was watching between my eyes. And then when nothing happened, I had like the giddiest sensation inside me, because they duped me. You know what I mean? They'd given me something that I didn't expect, that made me frightened because I was anticipating a scare, but then made me kind of laugh in relief when it didn't come. And I loved how that took one of my least favorite tropes in modern horror and then, made it good. So yeah, for me, the worst example of a jump scare are mostly the ones that come at the end to kind of cap off a movie that's not really needed. But then it's probably okay because The Conjuring made it good.
Yeah. I think there's definitely something to be said for the amount of jump scares in modern horrors compared to original, or I say original, older movies is basically what it is. So because we had 1925 as the first one, even though it was a silent jump scare, we had 42 with the Luton bus, and then Psycho kind of brought them around into more popular use with the Arbogast getting thrown down the stairs scene. And then we've got Repulsion with the mirror shot, which was 65. And then into the 70s and 80s, you get the rise of the slasher villain, which is when jump scares absolutely came to the fore, because everyone had to die in a dramatic and scary and surprising way. And since then, they've just gone up and up and up and more and more and more until we've hit saturation point. And now we're kind of at the point of elevated horror, I strain to say it again, where things are about creepy atmosphere and moving through without like actually jumping anything at you, like The Witch, like Ari Aster's movies. Things that kind of show you really horrible atmospheres and environments and things that you don't want to see, but are forced to slowly explore and feel more than just go, oh, geez, dearie me, the aliens popped out from the bush again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ask you just a bit of trivia for the end. How many scares do you think are kind of the average for recent horror movies? Because I found a really great resource called where'sthejumper.com, which is basically, people have made it because they're fed up of jump scares and fed up of being spooked. And they've got loads of great analysis about jump scares and how they appear in horror movies. And they've got a nice little statistic for how many are on average in horror movies at the moment. So what sort of number do you think we're looking at?
I'm going to just wildly guess 23 per movie. That's what I'm guessing. Around then. I don't know whether that's low or high. I don't know which way I've balled that there. I'm not sure.
How about you, Kirsten?
Yeah. I'd like to say that a good horror movie, I reckon, should have at least maybe 3 to 5, because I think if it's too many, it's just not scary anymore. But then when you're saying how many does the modern day horror movie have, I think it's definitely got to be higher, because I think that there is a lot of aspiring horror movie makers that are just relying on those continuous jump scares to try and make it scary for those people that maybe don't watch horror movies and that's the only sort of scare that they get. I think a good film is less, but I think nowadays that people are probably chucking in as many as they can to try and make it scary.
Do you have a number for me?
10. Let's go 10 to 15.
Kirsten, you got it in 1. It's 10. It is 10 per film. It's average 10. So Josh, you absolutely leapt at it there. I think that's all the bad ones you've been watching recently. Like
it feels like 20.
Yeah, but it's roughly 10 a movie. So if you're getting less than that, then it's probably quite a differently thought out one. If you're getting more than that, then it's probably a bit of a one of those movies. My next question for you. Now I've given you the information that there is 10 scares in the average horror movie. Obviously, that differs between particular films and different eras as well. What do you think is the movie with the most jump scares, and what do you think that number is?
Oh man.
This is just like pull it out your ass kind of answers.
Is it modern? Can we narrow it down a little bit?
I'll give you the year, 2013.
Okay. 2013. What came out in 2013?
I don't know if you're going to get this off the top of your head, but it's a sequel to another equally interesting movie.
A sequel? Oh man. Was the final Saw in 2013? Was that before then?
That's a good point.
Saw's not on my list.
Saw's on your list. The Conjuring came out in 2013, but that's not a sequel. I don't even know. Come on, Ash. Let's narrow it down a little bit. I feel like I've got to get it.
I was going to say maybe Paranormal Activity, but I feel like that the first one came out around that time, so and it did rely on a lot of cheap jump scares. I don't know. That's hard.
4th on the list is Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension in 2015 with 29 jump scares. So this is 3 more up.
Yeah.
And the first one is on here as well. I'll just tell you. It is basically, so the first one was The Haunting in Connecticut. This is The Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia. So if you remember that really, really, that horror movie.
That one.
Yeah.
I have seen that. That is terrible. That is an awful movie.
Yeah.
Terrible.
It's because it's got 32 jump scares in it, is why, Josh. That's what I can tell you.
At least that makes me feel less of a fool for saying 23. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If a film at least has had over 30, I don't feel that bad about my previous guess, even if it was miles off.
23 jump scares. There's a bunch of films that have 23, which is Annabelle Creation, Drag Me to Hell, Friday the 13th, Scream 3, The Grudge, and The Quiet Ones all have 23 in that big list. So you know what? 23 is a good number for the average, interesting horror movie, basically.
Can I say, actually, The Quiet Ones, I feel like could get away with it because that whole movie is about trying to be, silent. So every small sound would be scary. Even if it's not a jump scare, it'd be scary because you're just sort of like, no, don't make any sound. That's not allowed. So I think they can get away with that. But yeah, I think any other horror movie, that's 32 is...
Oh, it's a big number.
That's bad. That is bad.
I don't know if they've catalogued every movie ever and every jump scare ever, but it's just an interesting resource to have a little poke around. So if anybody else wants to take a look at jump scares across the years and different numbers and stuff for it, where's the jump.com? Oh, what a great resource. But yeah, that is it. That is it for us on jump scares. I don't have a jump scare in this podcast, which I feel is an issue. But we should have gone boo at some point. But we're going to end it.
You just did it.
Boo. I think we're going to. I think we'll finish up there. If you guys have any questions for us or things you want to see us cover in this podcast, we do a horror podcast every week at the moment. So send us your questions on Twitter with the hashtag WC Horror, and we'll have a look at those and we can answer them in future podcasts because you'll see more from the Trident of Terror, which is the 3 of us.
Very nice. Very good. That much better than the suggestions from last week.
The gruesome threesome. There's all sorts. You guys left some lovely comments in the last one for interesting names we can call ourselves. But Trident of Terror, I think, is the most elaborate. I like it. It's nice and fancy. But yeah, this has been the What Culture Horror Podcast on What Culture, which you should come and watch more videos on because we do loads of them. So hopefully come back soon and we'll see you then. I have been Ash. This has been Kirsten. Say goodbye, Kirsten.
Goodbye.
And this has been Josh. Say goodbye, Josh.
Goodbye, Josh.
And you can catch us all on social media. I'm going to do the rounds again. You catch us all on social media at Ash Millman for me. And for Kirsten, where can I find you?
It's at Kirsten Ria with 2 A's.
And Josh, where can I find you?
It's at Josh Broon with 2 O's.
Oh, those lovely letters. They keep on holding them. But yeah, basically, thank you guys for coming. Thank you for watching. I hope you had a spooky old time with us and that you learned some things about jump scares. Let us know your favorites, your least favorites, what you think about them in the comments, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.